inflammatory.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Not just in football. And I think Raheem should have widened it to not just talk about the perception that we have over footballers, just as that article portrays, but also generally speaking, when we hear about Muslim terrorists and Nigerian con men and Yardie drug gangs and Muslim grooming and pedophile gangs, whereby there are many more white pedophiles, white drug dealers than there are of the other group of people. But we don't hear we don't talk about that. Now, what that does, it is not targeting or it's not painting a negative image of drug dealers or a negative image of pedophiles. It's portraying a negative image of Muslims or of Nigerians or of Yardis. And it is a very subliminal, subtle way of indoctrination, because I have an argument with and I've had it for many, many years, as to whether the media influences society or it's a reflection on society. And more often than not, it influences society. Something which you may think is completely unrelated is Brexit, because we have been influenced, not just the people who voted Leave, but the people who voted Remain, based on the rhetoric that we heard, which influenced us one way or the other. So we are definitely influenced by what we actually see. So when Raheem talks about, which is very, very good, because, and we can't just label it to football, because racism is a problem in society, and we can't compartmentalize it to say it's in the police or it's in football, because it absolves the rest of society in terms of looking at itself to then say, how culpable are we in being part of this? And we all are.
Do you think then it's something that's getting worse?
It's not getting worse, but because we didn't hear it, we thought it was getting better.
Right.
Now, in football, what football can do is they can say, if there are any racist chanting, we're going to kick you out to the ground. So for any unconsciously racist football fans, all you have to do is keep your mouth shut. That doesn't mean it's getting any better. But of course, in times of confrontation that you saw with Raheem, people show their true colors. And people say, so you can't tell me those 3 people who actually were racially abusing him. There would have been hundreds who probably would have felt like saying the same thing, but they didn't. So does that then mean it doesn't exist? So until we start to tackle it holistically, looking at how to get rid of racism, and the only way we can do that is to tackle the cause, not the symptom. And that incident is the symptom of it, as is we've seen symptoms from Luis Suarez, John Terry. We've seen so many symptoms. And very much like a disease, you have to tackle the cause of racism, not the symptoms. And all we're doing is tackling the symptoms.
So going back to the time where bananas were thrown on the pitch when you were playing football, do you think that even though football maybe has tidied up its image a little bit, society still has those same sort of issues to wrestle with?
Well, before we are members of any football fraternity, we're members of society, so we're doing it the wrong way around. You can't look at football, because for football, for 90 minutes on a Saturday, or obviously football is played at different times now, you can't just say because for the 90 minutes we don't see it anymore means it doesn't exist in society. It is prevalent in society as you go into the inner cities and see how disenfranchised and how lack of opportunities are there for members of ethnic minorities. So why should football be any different?
We've heard, because of what happened to Raheem, Robbie Earle and Jason Roberts both saying that they feel like they've failed Raheem Sterling. What are your thoughts on that?
First of all, they haven't failed Raheem Sterling because there's nothing they can do to change it. Society has to change. They can't change society. Society has to change. And the only way we can do that is, and I always say this, for every Raheem Sterling, John Barnes, who may talk about how we were racially abused, for every Stormzy who says that singers won't get Grammys, and for every Idris Elba or black actors who say we're not getting Oscars, what about the average black person in the street? And until we change the perception of the average black person in the street, there will always be the opportunities for the so-called superstar black celebrities to get an Oscar and to get a manager's job and to get a, but that won't change. The only way we can change racism is if we change the perception of the average black person in the street, and then you will have many more average black people being given what they deserve.
So in terms of those newspaper headlines and those stories that Raheem Sterling was specifically talking about, you talk about changing society. What can the newspaper industry, and not just the newspaper industry, but the media in general, what sort of things would you like to see in terms of the changing of those narratives? And is that a long-term process, or can that change?
It's a very long-term process. We talk about hundreds of years of indoctrination in ensuring that there are certain groups of people who are more worthy than others. I'll give you an example. I don't really want to talk about this particular person in a bad light, or it's obviously on a different channel, but this is just the principle, Piers Morgan. And I don't know Piers, and I'm sure he's a very, very nice man. But the character of Piers can only be for a white middle-class man who will be successful on television. If it was a woman with Piers' character, that would not be acceptable. Or if it was a black man, it would not be acceptable. Because people may say he's belligerent, people may say that he's condescending, but he's accepted because he's a white middle class. Now, it's going to take a long time to change perceptions of different groups of people, but we know the group of the group who is completely accepted no matter what happens. We know who that is. And Discrimination affects women, it affects ethnic minorities because it's a perception of that person's capabilities. Now, for a woman to lead, for a black person to think, for a homosexual to fight in a war, these perceptions or misconceptions we've had over hundreds of years. And we can't change it by just all of a sudden coming together and saying, you know what you've learned and what has been instilled in you for hundreds of years? That's wrong because we're all equal. It's not as simple as that.
Can I ask you a question, and I accept this from a white man asking a black man this question. When you get asked questions about something completely different, does that thought which you've articulated so well, does that underlie everything you think? Because you feel that there is a sort of a system which is sort of almost fighting against you in some ways.
In many respects, I'm not talking about me personally.
No, but
no, but this is the point I'm making, because John Barnes is fine, and so is Beyonce, and so is Obama, and so is black people in the higher echelons of society. But I'm talking about, and I understand what black people go through. So when people talk about, oh, isn't that terrible what happened to Raheem Sterling? I cannot believe that this is happening this day and age. You speak to black people in the cities and they say, this is what we go through every day. It's not a surprise to us. So when people are talking about, we thought this already gone away, because it doesn't affect you. So very much when, even from a black perspective, we're talking about discrimination. We're talking about it from a black perspective. But women go through discrimination. They're talking about it from a female perspective. LGBT, homosexuals, it's all discrimination based on the misconception we have of those particular groups. And what I'm talking about is looking at it holistically rather than just saying, oh, it's a problem in football, it's a problem for women in business, it's a problem for homosexuals in the army. It is a problem of changing perceptions, and those perceptions are fueled by...
We see cases of abandonment in which the father, the mother just ran away, and then the child is just left there, 6-year-old child just there living with nobody. Although they all come from Cameroon, but they don't know her, she doesn't know them, she just forced to live with them. So you see so many children being vulnerable in the camps. We try as much as possible to take care of both refugees and nationals as well. I see the intervention of MSF in Cross River as timely, in the sense that prior to MSF...
Good morning, back again. Pain management, climatizing to the pain. Hence why I'll continue going to the gym. I'm in so much agony at this point in time. In my feet, in my ankle, and in my knees. Can't really walk properly and my spine hurts. However, if I can get through this, I actually improve my pain threshold. And that's how I managed to recover in regards to my knee and the gap to my toe. Thank you for listening. 37 to Cameroon. It's one of my targets.
Always put off because they think that they're going past their post.
Yeah, or no funding because the name of your organisation does not fit in with what the government says.
Who have you been told that by?
The children are being told by the schools. The schools are telling the children that this is what is happening. They can't talk in school. They can't do this in school. So how are they supposed to learn? Learning is about engaging, talking. So if you're telling me something that you want me to learn, I have the right to question if I'm not understanding. You can't teach just by being a teacher and just talking. Supposing it's not every 1 in 10 pupils will understand what is being taught.
Yeah.
But what about the ones that don't understand? And those are the ones that are going to be failed in society in general and as a whole. And that's what we want to work to eradicate, put a stop to, and let them know that they can do what people who are from better backgrounds can do.
Stopping silence in corridors, that's been eaten away at my head. Schools, like free schools and academies, have this new thing. While you're walking from one lesson to the other, silence.
When you're leaving school at the end of the school day, if you're talking, you get a detention at the end of the school day.
Can you tell me a bit about the event you've just been to?
100 Black Men of London
It's, I don't know, it's
Inspiring.
empowering as well for parents to know. I could
Have you
take
gone to it because there are no options available
I
within the
prefer
school?
to it
There is
because-
options. There was options because before I started this, I actually applied for early help intervention, early help year help for my son because he seemed to be going the wrong way. And rather than have the council or the government find someone for him, I wanted him to relate to people who look like him.
So the mentors are like young black entrepreneurs, young men who've gone through university. I'd rather my son relate to that
People
than
who have
somebody.
been rehabilitated, who were troublemakers and have been rehabilitated and are now
Great.
great for society. You know?
And they're good role models for kids.
Perfect.
It is not a situation where we are trying to carve out ourselves a boundary and to leave a country where we got independence as a unit. We came into that union with our own internationally defined borders. The borders of southern Cameroon are not being made now. They are borders defined by international treaties. That is different from what Biafra tried to do in Nigeria. The country that has seceded from the Union is the Republic of Cameroon, which has seceded. They declared their secession on February 4, 1984. It is they who have seceded. And we say you must follow your secession to the logical conclusion by pulling out of Amazonia.
On the 7th of June this year, the Guardian newspaper ran a special feature on the brutal campaign of violence by the regime of Cameroon's President Biya against English-speaking communities in the west of the country, which were formerly known as British Cameroon, communities to whom we owe a historic responsibility. They quoted in The Guardian the ordinary men and women who saw their villages attacked by Biya's military, who saw their neighbours and families members killed, and that they were forced to flee for their lives. They quoted the charity workers who were looking after thousands of displaced women and children for whom they warned going home would be suicide. Now, by any normal moral standard, you would expect the UK government to read those reports and be appalled. But not this government. The very next day after that report was published, the British Trade Secretary announced a £1.5 billion deal with a British national gas company and President Biya's regime. A deal which, in the words of the Trade Department's press release, will, quote, generate a huge stream of revenue for Cameroon's public treasury. In other words, we have a regime ranked as the 25th most corrupt in the world, a ruler in his 43rd year of autocratic power, with a personal wealth of over $200 million, engaged in a systematic campaign of brutality and killings against English-speaking community in his country, and all the government can do is boast of doing trade deals which will only enrich him further. That, in my mind, is what this government means by global Britain.